week, it's part 2 of fiber cleaning with our special guest, Brian Teague from Senko and Jake Jonnes from Polywater. We continue our conversation on tips and tricks and why it's important to keep your end faces clean. Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, project managers, estimators, and even ICT personnel. We are connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and the bell button to be notified when new content is being produced? If you're listening to us on one of the podcast platforms, such as iTunes or Stitcher, would you mind leaving us a 5-star rating? And if it's not a 5-star rating, let us know what we can do to make this a 5-star rated show. Thursday night after hours, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. What are you doing? Come check out our live stream. It's on TikTok. It's on Facebook. It's on LinkedIn. It's on YouTube, where you get to ask your favorite RCDD, well, that would be me, your questions on installation, certification, estimation, project management, even career advice. While this show is free and will always remain free, if you would like to help support this show, consider becoming a Patreon member. Go to our webpage to figure out how to do that. Also, you can go to our Amazon links page and look at the telecommunication tools and pick a tool and buy one, and we will make a small stipend off of that. Now, you won't pay more for that product, but we'll get a small stipend off it. Or you can actually even click on the QR code that's on the screen right now, and you can actually go and buy me a cup of coffee. Those who buy me a cup of coffee get free stickers. You can also schedule a 15-minute one-on-one call with me after hours, of course. Or you can even do some other stuff to get access to all of our social media pages. Now, let's get on with the show. Jake, maybe you can touch base on, because like I said, most technicians know about the alcohol wipes, right?
Yep.
And we've talked a little bit about the water and a little bit about the fast evaporating. I want to dive deeper in this because most people probably don't know about this, right? So let's talk to us a little bit about the water, because Brian brings up a good point. How's the water different than me turning on the tap water and soaking a towelette?
All sorts of differences. I mean, if you think about pulling water out of a puddle in the parking lot, or right from the well, or if you have a water softener, I mean, you're introducing types of ions into it. So you need to start with pure water to start with. And so what we do is we filter the water. It goes through a UV light to kill anything, and then deionization. So we use pure deionized water. So we're starting with as pure water as we can get. And then there's some other components added, but it is, most of it is water. And water is, if you need to break something down, water's fantastic, especially when you use some other products in it to support it. But yes, not all water is equal. If we take a cup of water here from Polywater and one from your house, Chuck, they're going to look completely different under a microscope. And so you have to start with something pure, and then we enhance that water. But and then it comes down to, it's a different process. It's got to be a wet to dry. You don't want to oversaturate. I know you don't want to go fill a jacket full of water. It's great for on a dry pad, to where you can put that connector on there, start at the wet and wipe to dry. And at that point, it doesn't have to be fast evaporating, because you're wiping most of it off, almost all of it.
Very cool. Yeah, I guarantee the water is different, because where I live in Central Florida, and my water pulls from the same aquifer that Zephyr Hills gets their water from. So I've got really nice, clean, clear water, right?
Chuck, the other thing too, also, not only is it just, getting it, but you also kind of goes back to the training thing that we were discussing before, was that I can give you the best wipe and I can give you a wonderful solvent, but if you have somebody that has not been trained how to use it, right? For example, with sticks, it can oversaturate things. I could come in and in some cases, I can actually end up making a mess. So it's again, I want to make sure people understand. It's like, we can go out and invest and buy these really great products, but we got to make sure our team knows how to use them properly, right? because I can give you the best tools in the world, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be a good carpenter. I can give you the best gun that I can find out there, but it doesn't make you a marksman. It's the skill and the technique. And that's where a lot of companies, for example, I mentioned Polywater would train you. So in addition to saying, hey, tell me about your situation, they can make recommendations for different products that they have that would work well in your search, your situation. But also you want to make sure that your folks know how to use these things correctly. And that's how they'll get the most benefit from it.
Well,
Gotcha.
and more isn't always better, right, Brian?
That is correct. Yeah, there's a lot of times learning from a guy who's fallen in the ditch. I thought little was good and more was better, and I've made a mess.
I thought that was the cable pulling lubricant rule.
Well, in that respect, more you would have to go pretty high on your quantity to cause some trouble there. But and so it's a good safe practice. But when cleaning ports or fiber, you do not want to oversaturate.
Gotcha. Now I know your team's probably done this, Jake. So on the water app, so when they clean it with they do the wet wash, they do the dry wash. How soon can they insert the connector after they use the wet system? Because it doesn't dry as fast as alcohol, right?
But I mean, if you take something and you wipe that off, I mean, you've taken almost all of it. Brian, I don't think you're really losing any time. I mean, you've used the product.
Right. So when you, for example, like if I were to use like one of the Polywater fluid and wipes, what I would do is put a little bit of wipe here. I would put my connector interface in and I'd wipe straight across. So in a case like that, as I'm getting into the wet section, that's loosening up the particulate or whatever's on the interface. And when I finish dry, it's ready to go. So you want to make sure both ends of the connector pair are clean, right? So this kind of goes into having a good inspection scope. I would start always, you talk about your checklist, Chuck. I would always start with, let's say we're always going to check the port side first. We'd come in with my scope. I would look if it's clean. Okay, it's good to go. Now I'm going to grab my other side, my jumper side, check it. If it needs to be clean it, check it real quick, make sure I did a good job with it. And now I'm ready to mate it up. The key is to clean. If you have to clean, do it right before the mating process. And then if you clean it and you go to lunch or something, I would still double check it before you plug it in, just in case. Because even if you put those caps on, the dust caps, sometimes those dust caps will outgas. Sometimes they have dust in there. So they're really protective against bumps and physical contact. So it's that's
ding, 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 ding. Winner, chicken dinner. It's a protective cap, not a dust cap. And I tell people in class all the time, I said, if you take a microscope and you look inside that dust cap, you're going to find dust. So now you're putting something dirty on something you just cleaned. Let me ask you a question, Brian, that I get asked in class all the time. And I know what I answer, but I want to hear your spot. Because you're a fellow trainer and fiber expert. I don't consider myself a fiber expert. I'm a generalist. I'm like the doctor that you go to all the time, and you're like the specialist. I refer somebody to you if they've got like some specialty problem. When it comes to cleaning a fiber optic connector and you're wiping it, should you always wipe it in the same direction?
Okay, so when you think about wiping your connector, what you want to do is put a little bit of the fluid and then kind of wipe in one direction. If you start wiping back and forth, what you're doing is you're potentially going across that same section. So anything I just took off, I could end up accidentally putting it back on. Same thing with that figure eight. I see people wanting to do the figure eight, thinking they're doing a good job. The figure eight was actually more for hand polishing back in the early days of doing field terminations. When you do that figure eight pattern, what you're doing is potentially running that interface back through the same section of. So for example, like if I took some oil off or whatever, and I come back in, how do you know you're not running back over and reapplying it? Or if you have like some dirt or something like that, how do you know that you're not running back over and accidentally scratching it? So the best thing to do is always kind of wipe in one direction. And usually whether it's some of the box of wipes or cassettes and stuff like that, a lot of times if you think about the cleaning window or kind of the surface area where the platen or that rubber backing is, just kind of pick one side and just kind of keep wiping like that. is the best thing to do. So that will help you avoid accidentally transferring something that you just took off.
Yeah, cross contamination's a pain, and you don't. The problem is it sneaks up on you, and then it catches you, and you're not really thinking about it, right? And until afterwards, right? So another question. This one, Jake, I want you to go ahead and answer this one first, since you're the chemical expert, right? What can we do to maximize using our cleaning products?
I think the best is to be upfront with buying the right products, storing them correctly. I think if you want to get the most out of your cleaning products, is A, buy the correct product, and B, store them correctly. Try to keep them in a cool, dry space. Buy them in containers that are sealed, and use the appropriate amount. Not over applying, not overdoing it. I think those are the three basic rules of getting the most out of it. And I think most important is knowing how to use them. Getting the training, call on the resources from the manufacturer or the manufacturers of the connectors. I mean, the companies that are building the components and the companies that build the manufacturing the chemicals both have resources to teach you the best practices.
So you're in Minnesota, don't you know? Let's say I'm a technician.
Can I throw in one more thing on what Jake was
Sure.
saying? So
Yeah.
there's other, let's say, industrial solvents. Once in a while, somebody will try to use. They're like, oh, this is fast evaporating. And the other thing too, when you think about using the chemicals, you want to make sure, like the good thing about the optical grade products that are out there, not only are they sealed, but Chuck, they also, you're dealing with things like with plastics. The ceramics are probably not too bad, but even with some of the composite ferrules, like on MTs and stuff like that, you're dealing with different types of plastic. You want to make sure that the solvents that you use are not going to cause any kind of degradation to the components of the connector as well. And so that's a good thing. I'll say this, we were talking about water earlier. Yeah, water's safe. That's not going to cause a problem. Even some of the other cleaning solvents, like for example, Polywater has another one, they're quick clean. Those are all really good, right? They're good, effective cleaners. They're not going to cause any kind of degradation to the plastic, or it's not going to, cause some kind of, what am I trying to say? Kind of like that orange peel effect with like lenses and stuff like that. Because sometimes some of these things have these plastic lenses, and I've seen where some of the chemicals that are out there, sometimes when people use it, even if they're kind of, let's say, technically use it correctly, you'll leave kind of an orange peel effect on the surface. So you want to make sure you pick things, and that's where working with a good quality supplier like the guys at Polywater, they can help you work through that and double check, and probably even get you samples so that way you can go through and evaluate it, and they can also probably teach you how to use these things correctly. But that's another thing too. Sometimes people don't think about is this stuff going to cause degradation? The reason I bring that up is you're starting to see more lensed type connector systems that are out there, and I have a feeling as we continue to the industry continues to advance, you're going to see more of that lens. And so that's going to be something right now. Maybe you don't have to think a lot about it, but maybe in a few years, if these things continue to take off, you're going to have to sort of keep that in the back of the mind too.
Gotcha. Compatibility is a big thing for sure. And we see it on the lubricant side because our lubricant is coming in contact with all this fiber optic cable, and it's not cheap and it's hard to get right now. And you want to make sure that whatever you're putting all over that cable or on your connector is not going to be ultimately damaging what you're doing. And that's a great thing about Polywater. We've always stayed in our lane. We're not, I in the very beginning, I said, we're a niche manufacturer. Mm-hmm. This is our niche.
And that's the number one reason why I tell people not to use soap from the bathroom as cable pulling lubricant, because A, you don't know what chemicals is made out of. B, you don't know what kind of stuff's inside of it, and we don't know how it's going to interact with everything. So, correct. Yeah. But to get back to my question, so I have technicians all over the place who listen to my show, even some from Canada, and it gets kind of cold up in Canada, right? So I know that. Is that really a concern for the water-based product? Should that technician bring his fiber cleaning kit in at night?
Yeah, I mean, if it's a water-based product, it's going to freeze. If you leave it in the truck, it is mostly water, and it's probably going to be it's a little bottle like this. I mean, for those people that are watching, I mean, it's a small 2-ounce bottle. It's going to be frozen. So is it that hard to bring your fiber prep kit in at the end of the night? I don't think it's that much trouble. And
No, and they should be bringing their tester in anyway. So that just grab the tester, grab the fiber toolkit set, right?
20 below zero is harmful on things that aren't chemicals. It's just electronics, and then as it warms up and cools down, you can get condensation, and so it's just good practice to try to protect those things.
Absolutely. What about the fast evaporating non-flammable cleaner? Does that have to be brought in?
Nope, that's not going to freeze. I mean, you might run into a situation if your package is not completely sealed with things warming up and cooling down with some condensation, some contamination. But for the most part, if it's sealed up, it should be pretty good. And that's that's also a very good cleaner. It tends to be the most expensive of the three, but it's non-toxic. It's it's safe. It's non-flammable, and it's a very effective cleaner. So again, all three, whether you're alcohol, water-based, or a non-flammable, fast evaporating cleaner, all work, all have their strengths. But again, one can freeze, one the vapor's not great on, one's most expensive. You just got to find out what works best.
Yeah, if you're working in a hospital environment, you may not want to use the alcohol wipe because of like I just mentioned, the asthmatic. If you're working like in a place that there might be sparks or something, you're in the same room that's generating sparks, you might not want to necessarily use the alcohol. What were you saying, Brian?
Well, I was going to ask actually a question for Jake. So, and Jake, I apologize. This is actually, I really don't know. I know with the fast evaporating solvents, I can use that also clean my fibers. So if I'm doing splicing, I can go through and use with the aqua. Am I able to use it with splicing also? So with these aqua based cleaners, do they work well with the fibers? Like if I was doing fusion splicing?
Yeah, you're just going to have to, I mean, it's going to be a little harder to get dry. I mean, you're going to have to be wiping down the fibers, and rather than because you don't really have the wet to dry application in that case. But yeah, once it's dry enough, and frankly, even if you're in the splicer, the arc is going to burn off any moisture in there anyway.
Good point.
So you're not going to have any issues. And the fact that what happens with some of the hydrocarbons or some of the chemicals, that arc, if there is some moisture from the chemicals, it will almost leave a residue because it's burning off, where moisture, water will just dissipate and it's gone.
No, it's a very good point, because you're right. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's like if I'm wiping it and I'm wiping it correctly, I'm getting, let's say, the cladding or any kind of like little, residue type stuff left. And then you're right. Once I put it into the fiber holders and it arcs, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were to send you a package right now, Brian, and you don't know what's inside of it, it could either be the alcohol, the water, or the fast evaporating non-flammable. Which would you rather have?
Well, I'm always going to go with the fast evaporating, probably the one that's more expensive, just because I know I like the fact that a lot of these fast evaporating, they actually have an evaporation rate that's faster than alcohol, even though alcohol is pretty quick. But again, if check it kind of is, which one's the absolute best. I think it kind of depends. If I were doing a lot of end faces, let's say like putting some racks in or something like that into my data center or to a central office, I'd be totally fine with either the sealed alcohol wipes that come from Polywater, or also the water stuff as well. If I'm doing like splicing in the field, like on a splice trailer on the side of the state highway, there I might be saying, hey, let's go ahead and make the investment and buy the higher end stuff, just in case, because also we're outdoors, and depending on where we're at, if the freezing thing is a concern or something like that, I would probably go with the higher end stuff. But I don't think you could go wrong with any of the three if you were working, typical connectors in a kind of a controlled environment like a data center, central office, telecom closet type thing.
Yeah, my dad always used to say it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I can imagine myself with a Batman utility belt with all three, because it kind of depends. It really all depends, right? Jake, let me ask you a question. I don't know if you've even done this or not. Just totally out of the blue. Because I know you guys like testing stuff. Have you actually tested maybe with contamination to see which one actually removes dirt better than the other?
I guess we have. I guess I'd have to pull it up. Each is going to have its strengths. So alcohol actually doesn't do particularly well with oils, believe it or not. Again, would you really notice that in a practice, in a daily install? But under a microscope, it's actually not as good as the fast evaporating cleaners, and water does water with the right additives is actually probably more effective. It tends to wet out a little longer. So they all have their strengths, and you're right with the Batman belt, and Brian's absolutely right. You really can't go wrong with all three unless you get the wrong one, in the fact that, yeah, I decided to go with alcohol. Again, we talked about it. You got the wrong alcohol.
Right.
So I could actually answer that question for him. So he's been kind enough to send me samples of his products, and I use them in my training and actually even some of my own testing. And I found all of them to be very effective at the common contaminants that we deal with, whether it's a fingerprint, even if it's rubbing across Brian's forehead for an extreme case. All three of his products have done very well. So, like I said, I don't think you can go wrong. And the good thing about what the Polywater guys have done, everything is made for optical grade, and they've done a good job of keeping their stuff sealed. Because I even go on the road and I take his bottles with me and some of his wipes, and they perform just as well as the first time as they do the 100th time, just and right to the end. So it's all about having a good optical grade product, and those guys do a really good job up there in Minnesota.
Now, I just want to make this clear for the person who might be listening who just started communications 2 weeks ago. When we say water, we're not telling you to stick it underneath a spigot and clean it. We're talking about don't you have the bottle right there, Jake?
Yeah.
It's a bottle.
Bottle.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Don't give us the secret sauce, but I mean, what?
Yeah. So again, it's deionized water. It's been filtered, UV to kill anything in it, and then it's deionized. So you're starting with the pure as water as you can, and you would want to just take the cap off. You'd want to spray this onto a clean towel. Again, that towel should be lint free. It shouldn't have any binders, because paper towels and various other things have combiners. The things that basically hold it together. And if you put types of chemicals or moisture, it ends up falling apart. And so you want to have a clean towel. You spray it on one side of it, and again, you're taking your connector and you're going from a wet to dry in one direction, like Brian said. No figure eights. That's all there is to it. And so you're starting with the pure product, and then when you're done, throw your cap, and don't leave it out in Minnesota at night in the winter.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that was abundantly clear.
Spring, or 9 months of the year, you can't leave it outside.
So don't take it with you when you go ice fishing.
Right, exactly.
And I just want to make that clear, because I could just hear somebody, because when you train enough people, you realize some people are literally brand spanking new to the industry, and some people, they know what you're talking about, and you got to talk sometimes a little closer to the people who don't know anything, because I could just see. But they said, Jake from Polywater said water. Yep. I got my cooler right here. See, I'm rinsing it off. I could just see it. I could literally just see it. Right.
Yep.
Let's ask one more question, because I know we're coming up on the hour here real quick. And this has to do with cleaning, but not with end phase cleaning, but outside plant. I'll give you guys a moment to think about that. What kind of a product should we be using to clean that icky pick off of our outside plant? Is there only one? Is there multiples? Is there a best practice? I mean, is there a best one for all of them? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to have the water blocking gels, or in a lot of the dry block fiber, you're going to see the powders as well. And so that is a different type of product. There are several out there, and there's some are well known. We take a slightly different approach. There's certain things that you don't want to have in it. The whole idea is to get that off with as few wipes as possible, because when you're pulling on that fiber, every time you handle a fiber, you risk the chance of breaking one. They're very small. They're not particularly strong. So you want to handle that fiber as few times as possible. And so you take the wipe, you try to flatten out your fibers, and you pinch on it and you pull. And with the product that we have, it's called Squeaky Clean. And the idea is you're trying to get the fiber squeaky clean and get it to fan, so you can separate, so it's easier to pick them apart and identify which fiber is which. So alcohol does get used for that. It does okay, but it's nowhere near as effective as like one of the products with like the citrus terpenes in it that are going to, break down that gel faster and get it to squeak. That's where I would go. And it doesn't hurt to use that on the dry block fiber. I mean, they've got a powder in there, and you don't want to have that on there as well. That should be removed. So you can use it on the gel fiber or the dry block.
What's your thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, the same. I would just say in general, I think most of the cabling guys, especially in the West, now China may be different, but they're moving away from icky pick and the buffer tubes, and so most of them now are going towards that powder. So what Jake is talking about, removing that powder is very important. What that powder does, just real quick, is if you have a nick inside of the buffer tube, if moisture got in there, it forms that gel barrier, and then when it dries, it returns back to its virgin state. It's very similar to maybe some of the material you might see like in a diaper, or some of these absorbency type of materials that go from powder to jelly type stuff. But for the most part, I'd say in North America and even South America, they're moving away from icky pick and they're going to the dry. But making sure you have a product that works well with with both is very helpful.
So there's a lot more to this cleaning stuff than just cleaning. Man,
absolutely.
Any final thoughts before we sign off? I'll go with you first, Brian, and then follow up with Dave.
Yeah, again, the main thing is when you start dealing with this stuff, the best thing you can do is try to make sure your team is trained. Make sure they understand what kind of situations they're going to be encountering, what kind of connectors they're working with, and they have the right tools that are available to them, and they know how to use them. Again, I can give you the best things in the world, but if your technique is off or you're not prepared, it's not going to be very effective. So, and then of course, the other thing too, anytime you're dealing with chemicals, think about safety. That's always important. You want to get things clean, but also we want to make sure that we don't get in trouble with some kind of environmental regulation or safety officer on the site or something. So those are the main things. Think about safety, think about training.
Jake, your final thoughts?
It's hard to add on to that. I mean, that's it's starting with the right materials and products. Make sure you're doing it correctly and have a focus on safety. You have to have the knowledge or pass that knowledge on to especially the new people coming in. There is a huge need for people to be installing fibers right now. And so we're going to see a lot of new faces. And so passing on that information is going to be imperative.
Gentlemen, I appreciate your time, and I look forward to another round table in the future with you guys. You guys are just so easy to talk to, so relatable. And I hope that everybody out there today has learned something new today. You have options, and not one option fits every option. So as I mentioned, there is no one system that fits everything. And I hope you've learned something from listening to today's show. If you have any thoughts, comments, concerns, make sure you put it down in the comments box so we can all learn together. Remember, until next time, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.